Hi everyone, it's Robert Joseph and I'm back. I have another pattern for you. This one is number 75. It's a basic robe pattern. And there are a couple really great things about this pattern is number one, it's unisex. Both men and women can wear it. Just be advised that the sizing is based on men's chest measurements. And my men's dress form here is wearing a size medium. And my dress form size is a size 40. I don't have that. I can't show you because I have clothes on it underneath here. But this is a size 40 chest. And I also have a size medium here, but this is on a women's dress form size 10, which the dress form sizes are not the same sizes as you would find in a store. So the chest on this is about 36 and a half, and the hip is about 37 and a half. So this would be about a size small dress form, but I have a size medium robe on this dress form. So if you are actually a size small woman, you would probably want to actually make the size small robe unless you like a roomier robe. Okay, the other great thing about this pattern is that you can make it out of either knit or woven. I have both knit fabrics here on the dress forms, and that's what I'll be using in the tutorial. The sewing is the same. However, on the pattern itself, I give you both grain lines. You will have a greatest stretch grain line and you will have a straight grain line. And for the wovens, you will want to use the straight grain line that runs, basically your straight grain runs the length of the fabric. Okay, so a couple of features on the basic robe are pockets, and then there's a waist belt accompanied with belt loops. So the waist belt and the belt loops are also, and pocket are also optional. If you don't want to put those on, you don't have to. There is a neckband that goes all the way around the neck through to the hem, which you actually do need to put on the robe itself. The sleeves are pretty easy to put in. There is not a lot of shape as they are an oversized sleeve. It has a very short cap and they're very large sleeves. So if you are a beginner, this would be a great pattern to use for learning how to install sleeves. So that's pretty much it. The other thing you should know about the video is that I use all my industrial machines. So I'm using an industrial overlock, also known as a serger, industrial straight stitch machine, and industrial cover stitch machine. So I chose to do that because I'm using my other home machines for another video to give to my students at school. So that's about all of the information you need to know about this pattern. Let's get into the tutorial. Okay, so we are ready to start cutting fabric out, but I just wanted to bring up a couple of notes just to go through the pattern. So for the neckband, the area that goes around the neck and down the front, we have a back neckband, which I have center back here, marked with the castle notch here. And then I have the lower band, which is here. And there's going to be a seam right around chest level that is going to um, match to a notch that is on the front pattern piece. If you don't want that seam there and you have enough fabric, perhaps through the length of the grain, you can actually attach the pattern pieces overlapping the 1/4 inch seam allowance on both sides. Or if you want the center back seam, you want the seam to be in the center back of your neck, slash this pattern in half and then add a 1/4 inch to it, and then just add the lower band to the back band, overlapping that 1/4 inch. So there are a couple ways you can do that, but I'm going to keep it the way it is. And the reason I did that was for printing purposes. We have the pocket, and we're going to turn down the hem. The hem for the top of the pocket is 1 inch, and then we're going to press over 2 of the sides, the bottom and 1 of the sides, toward the center front, and then top stitch it to the front. And let me find the front pattern really quickly so I can show you that on the front pattern, there are markings here for the pocket placement here at the top approximately, and approximately at the bottom. Okay, so once this is folded over, the top of the hem of the pocket should match here at the side. Okay, and this is the back, which we're going to cut on the fold. I have this. This here is the belt, um, and I have here attached to the belt pattern. This is the belt loop, which will actually be attached here to the front. I have these two notches right here, and that will of course show you how I'm going to do that. And then of course we have the sleeve. And one of the things that I want to also point out about this pattern is that even though I don't, I do have it on the belt. Anyway, I have two grain lines. Now, most of my patterns have been for knitwear, so you should be aware that I have a greatest stretch grain line, and that is usually the width of the fabric because it needs to be stretched around your body. But on this pattern, I also have a straight grain. And the reason I have the straight grain is because this pattern can also be made out of wovens. So if you have a lightweight woven that you want, or maybe a silk charmeuse, you want to go sexy, put this on the straight grain and you'll be all set. The other thing is you'll notice that I have two different types of notches. So for instance, on the back here, I have this castle notch, which these are used for knits, and these are cut on the outside, toward the outside, and you'll see me do that as I cut the fabric out. But for the sleeve hem and the body hem, I have the T-notches here. Now you don't need to clip into if you don't want to. Remember, there's only a 1/4 inch seam allowance, so if you clip too far, you may be cutting into the outside of your garment. So just be aware that I've put these here as a placeholder basically for the hem, and I have a 1 inch hem allowance on the sleeve and a 1 inch hem allowance on the body of the robe. And I just put those as indicators. Later on, once I get into the sewing, I'm actually going to mark the hems with some chalk and then just fold them over. And I'll walk you through that process. So I'm going to get started with laying this out and cutting this out. And there are a couple of different ways, of course, that you can lay this out. I give you, I think, a diagram in the information packet of how you can lay it out. Now, if your fabric is wide enough, usually your knits run 58 to 60 inches wide. You could, for instance, I'm just going to do this really quickly so you can get an idea. If you're cutting out one of the smaller sizes, I'm going to be cutting a medium. I always cut out a medium because that's my size. So if you're cutting out a medium or smaller, usually the widths you might be able to get, if you reposition your front, you might be able to get the front and the back cut out in the width. Today I'm using a directional print, meaning that the print only goes one way. But if you're using a print that is two-way or a solid, you can flip your pattern pieces like this and probably get the front and the back out of one cut. Now for the larger sizes, you'll have to do single cuts, and that's the way I'm going to do it today. So I'm going to start with the back. One thing I am going to change up here is, let me grab this back neckband. I'm going to cut this out two different ways. I'm going to cut the neckband out on two of the grains. So because I only need one of the back neck band, I'm actually going to fold it in half using that castle notch as the mark. And I'm going to actually lay this here. I already have my fabric laid out here. I'm going to place this on the fold up here at the top. I just need to cut one of these out. And then the other neckband, because I kind of want the print to go the same way, I'm actually going to lay this here up here toward the edge and actually cut it on the straight grain. And I can do that. This knit, it is stretchy, but it has a lot more cotton in it, so it doesn't have a lot of stretch. But these patterns, this pattern is actually meant to go together really well, so there's not a lot of stretching or easing in that you'll need to do. However, if you would rather cut it like this, just make sure that you're not cutting it on the fold, because we have two different seams, a hem and then a seam that we have to do. You can cut it like that and then get on with the rest of your pattern layout. Now, as you know, for most of my videos, I speed up the cutting, and this cutting is going to take me a little bit, so I'm actually going to speed this up faster than I usually do. So just be aware that in the, I believe in the settings box on YouTube, you can actually click on the settings and change the speed. I know some of you like to get going a little bit quicker. I know my videos are long, so some of you may want to hit the 2 times, and I'll go a lot faster. Or if you need me to slow down, just hit the slower version of this, okay? So I'm gonna get to cutting out, and once I'm all cut out, we will actually begin the sewing with actually the pocket. So we're going to do the pocket first and attach it to the front, okay? So once I'm done cutting out, I will be right back with you. Okay, so now that we have everything cut out, I am going to work on the pocket. Okay, so I'm going to remove all of these other pieces. Get all this other stuff off of the table. We won't need it just yet. So this is a rather large pattern. So while I'm doing this, I can tell you that this robe is actually a little bit on the short side. So it comes to just below the hip, or about the crotch level line for men. And the reason I did that was because I think there are about 40 pages to print this pattern, and I wanted to make those pages a little bit less, so you don't have to print as many pages. And I think all of the pages have the pattern on them. So I just wanted to make sure that there weren't any blank pages. You can, of course, and I'll mention this again once we get to the front and the back, that you can lengthen it just by adding length to the bottom. Okay, so the pocket, here's the pocket, and I have the 2 notches. This should be about 1 inch fold back, as I say here. So instead of, I mean, I can press this, but a quicker way is actually to just mark that off. And if I would have prepared myself, I'm just going to grab a ruler and some chalk somewhere. I have a small piece of chalk. You can just take your ruler and draw a line. Can't really see that very well. Okay. And then press. And I should have my iron going. I'm going to go ahead and press up once that is there. So understand on this, your 1 inch line on the pattern is actually at the tip of those notches. So right here, that would be your fold line. Okay. So I'm just going to lightly mark the other side. And then we're going to get these hemmed, and then we're going to press over. Now on the pattern, it says 1/4 inch seam. and this aligns up with the pattern. So if it's this one, we're going to fold up and press these two sides because this goes into the side seam. And if we turn this over, then it's this edge and this edge that gets pressed under, and this side goes into the seam. Okay, so even though these lines will go away, I will mark this at the 1 inch. You probably can't, maybe you can't see this line. I had other sharper chalk, but I'm just going to go ahead and fold that on that line, fold over and press here. Press that down. And then, as I mentioned in the intro to this, I'm going to be using my industrial machines today. So I will be using my industrial serger. We also like to call it an overlock. Also, my cover stitch machine. I'm not going to be using the zigzag. I have my home machine set up in the other room because I was shooting a different video for something else, not for this site. So that was just basically for school for my students. And so I have everything set up here with my industrial sewing machine. So I'm going to be using this anywhere. I use the cover stitch. You can use a zigzag stitch, or you can use a double needle in your regular sewing machine. My iron is about ready now. So I'm just going to press these down. This fabric has a little bit more cotton in it, so it's a little bit more manageable. Okay, so someone from another video was asking me what iron I use because I didn't show the ironing in that one. Oh, this looks a little bit dirty too. Oh well. So this is actually the Panasonic. How can I show you that? And it's the cordless. So you see the prongs there. It sits in a base, and it's okay, but I've had this for a few years now, and the steam is a little bit irregular. There's a button here for steam. It doesn't always come up when you want. There is a button here so you can leave the iron in the base, press that, and you can actually take the water out and go fill it up with water again, and then just put it right back in. What I have issues with is when I'm working a lot, I just set it in the base, and it doesn't always click into where the prongs are to heat it up. So sometimes right now I have to like really click it into the base. So I used to have a Rowenta, which I still have the Rowenta, but I don't use it because the cord is really chunky and it's a little bit heavy to be going back and forth. And I like having the cordless so I can just come over here and press on the table. Okay, so I'm going to go over to the cover stitch. Again, I'm not going to talk you through that part because it's just the sewing. You put it in here and you're actually sewing on the top, right, the outside. You just got to make sure that those needles cover all of those edges. If you want to overlock this hem, the edge of the hem, you can. I usually don't do that because the cover stitching usually keeps it from fraying. Knit doesn't really fray anyway, especially this one. Okay, so I'm going to cover stitch those, and I'll be right back here to press up the edges. Okay, so we have the cover stitch done. Again, you can do this with a zigzag stitch or a double needle if you want. These don't really need to stretch except for when you're getting in there, your hand in there, okay? So now remember, one of these sides is not going to be pressed up. And we're going to be top stitching these with the straight stitch. At least I'm going to be doing it with a straight stitch. You could also do it with a zigzag. You could even do it with a cover stitch down, but you'll have to stop and then lift the presser foot up and then turn it. Cover stitch, you can't pivot because of the double needle. And you'd probably have to reinforce one of the corners. So for this one, this is actually going to be if I'm wearing it, the right side of the garment, and this is the left side of the garment. So I'm not going to press this side up. So it's just going to be this side and this side, and I'm going to flip this over to remind myself. So I'm going to turn this up a 1/4 inch. Now, if a 1/4 inch for you is hard for you to do, you can measure this, or you can just do it by eye. Just do it by eye generally. You can add another 1/4 inch to these folded sides if you need to, if that helps you out a little bit. Just go along here. And then I'm actually going to pin, which I don't do a lot of pinning, but I'm going to have to pin this on the top of the front so that it doesn't move around while I'm sewing, because knits do. Okay, this is actually a pretty simple garment to make. Okay, so let me flip this around. I've got that pressed. Those are my pressed edges. Okay, and just show you again. This is my seam side. I'm flipping this around, so now I'm going to fold up this side back and that side, and I just put my iron back in the cradle so it could get warm again. So let me flip this over. Okay, let me grab my iron. Now I got to fold up this side. And by pressing this, it just helps me kind of keep everything flat while I'm pinning it on. All right, so I'm going to take my pressing mat off of here, and I'm going to bring in the front. The two front pieces. Okay, don't need this up here. Okay, so let's see. Okay, this is the left front. Go ahead and pull out the right front and get this laid out here so we can see it. Okay, there's the right front. And now the left front. Okay, so this goes on the left side. So remember these two top notches next to the underarm. These are for the belt loops. So we're going to line the top of the pocket up here with that notch going along the seam. And I think I overpressed on both of these. Not quite hitting that notch. I'm going to pull this up so I can pin that a little bit easier so I'm not bending over the table. Okay, 2 notches. Third notch is where we line up the pocket. Okay, and again, I gotta pull this. I have a bad back, so I don't like to lean over a lot. Now, what I'm gonna do, as long as I've got everything lined up to the side and everything is laying flat, okay, right on top, okay, I'm going to stitch here, stitch the pocket on from the top of the hem down to the corner and then pivot and out to the side. So I've got to make sure that I put my pins in there correctly. So I'm going to pin in the direction of sewing, okay? So the presser foot will be here. I will be sitting here so I can pull these out as I get there. And I'm probably going to pin more than I would normally do, just so you can see what I'm doing here. And once I get to this point in the corner, at the corner, I am going to be sewing this direction. So I'm going to put a pin, actually not quite in the middle, here and then toward the end. And I like these big pins. These are actually quilters pins. Well, they call them quilters pins. They come in a big box. I got them at Joann's. I just like how long they are, and I can grab onto them. Okay, let's get this one all pocket all lined up and folded. If you find that these little edges are poking out, you'll probably see me do this in the video. I just use my snips, or you can use a stiletto or something to just kind of poke those underneath the stitching. So again, I'm going to sew from here, the top of the pocket down here and this way. So put a pin up here at the top. Now, of course, knits like to move around, so some folks like to use a walking foot, and that's fine. Sometimes walking feet don't do so great over thicknesses, but that's up to you. I don't have a walking foot on my industrial machine, so I'm just going to go slow and then manage the fabric as I go. You could put some tissue over the top or at the bottom, and that would help with some of the stretching as well. Okay, so I'm all pinned up. I'm ready to sew these. So I'm going to take this over to my sewing machine and get this all stitched up. Okay, so now that I have the pockets sewn, you can kind of see they're a bit wavy, and my stitching could be a little bit straighter, but that's okay. I probably would have stitched it with a little bit of tissue or something underneath, so that it wouldn't stretch. So I'm just going to press this flat really quickly. My iron is still warm. Just press it down flat like that. That will take the rippling away. Make sure everything is flat. Okay, and then I'm going to grab a couple of pins here, and I'm just going to pin, this is the side seam, so I'm just going to pin those down so those don't go anywhere. And I'll just pin this way. That'll just be a reminder to me. I don't want them to flap back. Okay. And then I will do it on this side. Now, since I already have my sewing machine set up and the camera is still over there, I'm actually going to do the belt loops. So if you're sewing along with me, grab those belt loop pieces. They're just two small rectangular pieces. I'll leave the pins here. Put the fronts over here. Take this off. Okay. So I've got my two pieces here. And if you want them to be longer, of course, you can just make these longer if you feel like you need to make them longer. Okay, so this is what they look like. All we're going to do is fold these lengthwise. Okay, like that. And do a 1/4 inch seam allowance along the length. And then we'll turn everything right side out. And I have my loop turner. If you don't have a loop turner, you could use skinny tweezers to kind of get up there and kind of grab the end and pull it, or you might actually have a tube turner that will help as well. You could also keep a long thread on one of the ends, and then use the needle, put it through a larger needle eye and insert it down and try to pull it that way. I'm just going to use my sewing machine. This can be a little tricky with a sewing machine with such a short seam allowance, but I think it will work. You can just, of course, overlock this and then turn it inside out. So I'm going to run over to the machine really quick, get this sewn up, and then I'll be right back here with my loop turner. Okay, I'm back. I'm going to do one thing really quick. You don't have to do this. I'm just going to press the seams really quickly, and then I'll probably press these afterward, just like that. That's good. Now I'm going to grab my loop turner. If you've not worked with a loop turner, it looks like this. And if you can see if I can open this up a little bit. This up to the camera. There's a little loop and little latch there. Insert this through and grab some of the fabric and put the latch there. So I'm just going to insert this here. As I try to do the seam, you can push this latch. See if I can get it through the latch. Whoops, it closed. You just don't want to try to grab too much fabric in there. Whoops. Okay, you kind of see that. Okay, and then just kind of very carefully. Now, when you pull this, you need to keep a little bit of tension, otherwise it may come out of the latch. But once you get it, and then of course, once you get the fabric through to the other side, you don't need that. So I use this. This is usually most used for spaghetti straps. And I have a whole tutorial on making spaghetti straps in the Apparel Arts Academy playlist. And those videos were made for college students who were in a fashion program. So a lot of sewing samples in those playlists. There should be Apparel Arts Academy 0, and then 1 and 2. I am working on 3 now. Come on. There we go. Well, these are just the belt loops. They don't have to be super pretty. If you don't want to cut and make them out of fabric, of course, you could just you could just use some ribbon or some drawstring fabric. If you already have a drawstring, maybe you have some old lounge pads lying around and you don't use them anymore, you could use a drawstring for that. Okay, I'm just going to press those down really quick and make sure they're flat, and then we will attach these to the front. Okay, nice and flat. All right. Of course, here we go. We can move this out of the way. Okay, so here we go with the right front. Pull this up here so I can see it. Let's see. Make sure that's still in view of the camera. Okay, so my notches are here and they're here. So all you need to do is take your belt loop, and I know this is all the same fabric, and you're going to put one here to the center of that notch. I'm going to kind of pin into it, and then you're going to kind of walk it around. Make sure you don't do this. I mean, you can if you want to. It puts a fold in the loop, so I tend to walk it around so it's the same direction. Okay, and again, if you feel like these loops are too short, you can lengthen them. I like the loops to be a little bit closer to the body. I'm going to tack these. Once these pins come out, it'll lay a little bit flatter like that. You can't see that, kind of like that. We're going to tack them so they don't move around. And then once they're sewn in, we just kind of have to be careful that we don't sew the actual loop into the seam. And I will remind you about that when we get to that point. I'll get these pinned in here. Okay, so now I'm going to go over to the machine and I'm just going to tack these down. And I would suggest don't just tack it here in the center, tack it all the way across so that it lays flat on the seam. All right, so that's what I'm going to do. Okay, so I'm not sure what happened with this video for the robe attaching the belt loops to the robe. Obviously, this is not the robe. I'm just doing this so you can see how I'm sewing on the belt loops or tacking them to the front. So everything is the same. The notches are the same space. So I don't know what actually happened to the footage of that. It seems to be the only video part that I'm missing, I believe. So I've been having some challenges with shooting this video. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and sew this. Remember to sew across the entire width of the belt loop width. That helps it from, like, when you're sewing the regular side, that this doesn't turn up or anything like that. Okay, and only slightly less than 1/4 inch. Okay, so now that we have the belt loops sewn on to the side, we can actually get to sewing up this garment. So we're going to work on the shoulder seams. So I'm going to pull, this is the front again, pull those down. Here, and we have the left and the right front, so I'm going to pull this down a little bit in view. And then I pulled the back in. So this is the back, and we're going to match right sides or face sides together at the shoulder seams. So this is the back. Make sure that you're getting your neck edge, neck points, and shoulder points on the right place. Okay. And I'm going to use clips instead of pins. I actually prefer clips, but when I use pins earlier, it helped keep everything together without any extra weight. So these clips work really well when you're using the serger or the overlock. So I really like them because depending on which side you're going to be sewing on, and this will be 2 different sides of the seam. Anyway, so just match up your corners, and I like to sew from the neck out to the shoulder point. That way the neck doesn't get stretched out, and hopefully the shoulder point or the armhole doesn't get stretched out either. But it's easier to correct the armhole than it is to correct the neck. Okay, so I've got these all clipped up. So shoulder seam starting here at the neck and sewing out to the shoulder. All right. Okay, so now we have the shoulder seams sewn on, and so now we're actually going to work on the sleeves. So I'm going to carefully fold this out so I see the face side of one of the armhole areas. So if you lay it out nice and flat, then you can see everything. You want to make sure that you have your shoulder seam folded toward the back. And then make sure that you can see all your notches. This is the front, bottom of the armhole. This is the back, the castle notch there. Okay, I like to lay everything kind of flat. And I'm going to grab one of the sleeves or just bring both over. So we have to figure out which sleeve. We're matching face sides together, as we usually always do. So this is the castle notch on this side, so I actually need to flip this over. And I'm going to take this top one off. And this is the sleeve, so we're matching all the notches. So this is the front notch. This notch here is to the shoulder seam, and this other, the castle notch, goes to the back. So I like to match all of the notches first, so I'm just going to bring this over here. There's no need to stretch anything. Okay, and then I'm going to match the shoulder. Again, remember that your shoulder seam needs to be folded toward the back. And then find that castle notch for the back. Now this should ease right in as you sew it, so don't worry about this area here. Now I'm going to match up the extra underarm area, just kind of guiding that fabric along that edge. Clip that, and then I'll do that with the front very carefully, just guiding the edges along there and clipping the end some way. Okay, now if you want to, and I may go ahead and do this area here where there's a slight curve, obviously you're sewing a convex to a concave. They should go in. You might find a little bit of rippling, and you can work with that as you sew it in. Now, I like to put my sleeve on the bottom, so this is the sleeve part, so this goes toward the feed dogs. You should not be stretching your armhole on the body. Don't stretch that armhole, try not to. The extra ease here in the sleeve cap, that is for wearing ease. So the feed dogs should automatically, when they're taking the fabric along, moving along, should automatically kind of ease that in. So try not to stretch your armhole to fit that. We want to ease that in there. But the way I made this pattern is that it should fit exactly. Okay, so I've got that all pinned. I'm going to go over to the overlock and get this all sewn up. Okay, so I've got the sleeve sewn in here. Let me turn this face side out so you can see what it looks like here sewn in. And you can see that curve here. It's sewed in really nicely. Okay, so that's how you put the sleeve in. I'm going to put the other sleeve in off camera just to save on video time. So if you need a review, just reverse the video and go back over, and so you can just review of how I put that sleeve in. Okay, so now I have both sleeves sewn in, and now I need to sew up the side seams. Okay, so I'm going to fold, this is the back, I'm going to fold this over the front, if I can fold this out from the shoulder seams, the sleeves. I don't know if that did such a wonderful job. This layout as flat as we can. Okay, here's the front, those laid out. What I like to do now is I like to match up these underarm seams here, and these seams will be folded toward the sleeve. I know they naturally lie the other way. You could sew it that way if you want. If you want to put a top stitch there, you can. We're going to do some top stitching around the band, but I like to fold the seams in the direction that I'm going to be sewing. And I'm going to be sewing from the hem all the way up through the underarm sleeve and to the sleeve hem. So I'm going to put a clip here. I'm going to go ahead and clip the rest of the sleeve. I'll move this out this way so you can see. Okay. So fold this in half, matching up your edges. Now, here at the hem, there's kind of a little V shape. Well, you will need to actually just adjust that when you sew down, and then just pivot a little as you're sewing in your serger. So let's put a clip there. So this fabric really likes to stick to itself. There's a lot of cotton in this. Clip and clip. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and whoops, here's the front. Get all that in frame. Now remember about the belt loops, that you don't want to get that belt loop caught in the seam. So you could probably pin this down, or if you're worried about your presser foot hitting the pin, you could also take some tape and just tape these down. I'm going to chance it, and I'm just going to lay my side seam over here. Now remember that I have the 2 notches on the back also that tell me where the belt loops go. So I'm just going to clip there. And then let me get this matched up to the bottom, the hem, and I'll clip that one. And then make sure that, see where I've got these pins where I'm holding the pocket together, I can put clips there and take the pins out, because of course we don't want to sew over those pins. Okay, and take that pin out. Okay. Now while I'm here, I usually like to do things the same time. I've got that all clipped up. I'm going to go ahead and do this. If you've already got what you need to do, you can fast forward through this part. I'm going to go ahead and do both of these the same way. Get this sleeve done. Once you get the hang of doing this robe pattern, it actually comes along pretty quickly. This is actually probably a good larger beginner pattern because it deals, or more of a somewhat intermediate beginner project, only because it works. We're working with notches and we're working with smaller pieces, and we're doing a little bit of top stitching, working with a very basic pocket, and then of course a very basic sleeve. As you know, if you've sewn any shirts, dress shirts, those sleeves can be a kind of a challenge, and this would be a great introductory sleeve to inset because it doesn't really require a lot of easing. Okay, match this edge up. I'm trying not to lean over, but just a couple more clips here and we'll be ready to go over and sew this seam. Those pins out. Okay, so I'm all ready. I'm going to be in the overlock, and I'm going to start at the hem of the bottom of the robe and sew all the way up through the armhole to the hem of the sleeve. Okay, so now that we have the side seams sewn up, let's go ahead and turn this right side out and see what we have. I'm sure it is looking very good. It's looking like a robe, more or less, right? Okay, everything's looking good. Okay, so now what we need to do is we need to work on this neckband and the front band that goes all the way down. Okay, so let's go ahead and put this aside. Fold that over this way. And I'm going to bring this neckband in. Now remember, this is the back neckband that I cut on the fold here. So I'm going to go ahead and open this up. This is the back, my castle notch. And then on either one of these, either side of this, on both sides of this, I have notches. And that's what these are for. This is the other end of the bottom part of the band. So there's a notch here, and then there's a notch here. So I'm just going to actually lay those right on top. This is an easy one. I'm just going to put one clip. We're going to get this sewn together, and then we'll be right back here after we sew these two seams together, base sides together. We're going to fold this in half lengthwise, and then we will attach it to the body of the garment. Okay, so I'm going to go sew these up right now. Okay, there we are. We've got the bands sewn together. I'm going to grab my pressing board, bring that in here. Okay, let's go ahead and just fold this, and we'll just take this off the table altogether. Okay, so here we have this, and what we need to do is, if you see the center back, fold this down, just fold these right in half, matching those notches like that. I'm actually going to start here with the seam. I'm going to press that seam toward the back. This is the back piece, the back neck band. See if my iron is ready. Press that back, and I'm going to press this right over. See if I can get a little bit of pressing out of this. That looks pretty good. I'm going to have to put the iron back on its counterpart here. It needs to be a little bit hotter. Let me see if I can fold all the rest of this. That big clunk was me putting the iron into its case so it can get warmed up. So I'm just going to finger press this down. This is a lot more cotton in it, so it will probably stay flat. I just like to have this pressed. Everything stays together if you press it first. I'll leave this seam alone a little bit because I'll press that back as you sew it. So that's why I'm pressing this before I put it onto the garment. This folds nicely. Okay. Hear that iron click, so I think it's about ready. Okay. So I'm gonna just fold that back, get it nicely pressed that way. Fold that back this way. Okay. Try not to stretch the fabric, the knit, as you're pressing it. Sometimes that can cause some distortions. Okay. You hear that steam going finely. The steam came up. So I had this iron. I don't know. I probably might need to replace it. All right. So we're ready to get this clipped to the garment. Let's put this over here. Don't need this now. I've got to grab some more clips as well. We'll put that here. Grab some clips. They're all at my overlock machine. All right, so let's open this up here. Now, one thing that I didn't do on the pattern is make a mark or a notch for the center back. So all you need to do is grab a straight pin, or you could even just mark it with an erasable pen or chalk. Match up the side seams very carefully. fold the edges, fold that neck area in half, and I just like to put a pin there, and that's only going to be there for a minute. Okay, so there's my center back. Now there's only one other notch on here that you have to match, and that's here, this notch right there. In fact, maybe I'll just go ahead and put a clip there so you can see it. That notch is where you're going to match the seam on the neckband. So this is the other notch. Okay, so let's find the center back. So I've got my castle notch here. So that's going to match here, face sides together. And when you come around, let's see, where is that? Here's the seam. You're going to match that seam to that notch where I have that clip. So I will first go ahead, fold this up, match the castle notch to this pin. You can pin it if you used a pin like that, or you can just grab another clip. And I'm going to clip this. And then what I like to do is I like to go ahead and match that seam up. Go ahead and clip that in place. Make sure it's not twisted. Make sure that you're not getting any twists like that. I've done that before, not on this pattern, but a different pattern, and had to rip everything out because I got everything twisted up. So I'm matching this seam up to this notch here, clipping it. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to carefully walk around. Be careful of the back neckline. Try not to stretch the back neckline. I'm up at the shoulder, and I want to press that, fold the shoulder seam toward the back. So I'm going to put a clip there and then walk the rest of the neckband around. Now, when you come back from that shoulder, in the front there is a slight curve, but everything should ease right in. And I'm probably going to sew this so that the neckband is on the top and the body of the garment is at the feed dogs. Now, there aren't any other, after this seam here, this notch up here, there aren't any other notches. This should fit exactly to the edge of the bottom, the hem. Okay, I did have an additional notch there, but I think it just got in the way. And I found that because I had done a good job of matching the band length to the front edge length, that I didn't really need an extra notch. Okay, so now that there's one side done, let's go ahead and do this other side. Again, be very careful. Try not to stretch that neck out. Fold the shoulder seam toward the back. Clip that. And then carefully walk the top of the front to that notch. That should be fitting in. If not, it should ease right in as you're sewing. You don't want to stretch out that front neck edge. If you need to stretch, then you should stretch the neckband ever so slightly. Okay, so let's match this to the hem. And I will be sewing this from hem to hem. So I'm probably going to start right here on this edge, from the hem all the way around to the other hem, the bottom of the robe. Okay. And again, if I were just making this for myself without a video, I probably wouldn't be using all these clips. But for those of you who are maybe beginners or not as experienced, these clips really help keep everything together. Okay, so where are my shoulders? I'm going to pull this out just carefully. So this is what it's going to look like when we get it all sewn. Okay, So I will start right here. I'll put this in the machine, this bottom edge, and sew all the way around. Okay, so we have the neckband on. It went on really nicely. So now I'm going to do some top stitching, and I'm going to do some top stitching here near the neckband. So what I'm going to do is here is the neckband seam allowance. I'm going to make sure that that is folded toward the body of the robe, and then I'll top stitch here just to hold that down. Now you don't have to do this. You could probably just press it and it will stay flat. But I'm going to use my cover stitch, and I'm going to do a double needle here. So cover stitch, or you could use a double needle in your regular sewing machine. You can also use a zigzag stitch. Since this is actually made for actually woven as well as knit, and I'm doing a knit, you could probably just go ahead and do a straight stitch as well. This part of the robe does not need to stretch, so I think you'd be okay doing that as well. So I'm not going to pin anything. What I'm going to do is while I'm in there is I'm just going to make sure that the body is actually folding away nice and flat away from the neckband, instead of it being kind of bubbled over. You don't want to get any of that, okay? The idea is that we're just going to be holding this seam allowance down. So I'm going to go over to the cover stitch and do that now. And then we will actually go ahead and hem everything. And then we will do the tie, the waist tie, okay? So let's go ahead and move over to the cover stitch machine. Okay, so we have our top stitching done on the band. So now we're actually going to work on hemming this. And you can, if you would want to, you can turn this wrong side out and of course press up on the sleeve an inch all the way around if that is what you want to do, and then zigzag it, or you can use a double needle. But remember, I'm using a cover stitch, so I'm always looking at the face side of the fabric. And I'm going to do this the easy way. I'm going to grab a ruler, and I'm going to grab a marking pen. I have an erasable marking pen. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to mark off that 1 inch. This is red, so I can see it really nicely. And then I'm just going to fold as I sew. I like to do it that way. It's quicker, and that way I don't have to press before I'm at the machine. So this is how I normally do it. And of course, if you're in any kind of environment that requires you to be kind of speedy, For instance, alterations department, which I did for most of my career. You actually just mark where you're folding, and then you're going to fold it and put it through the blind hemmer or the cover stitch or the machine, whatever machine you're using to do your hemming. So I really like these pins, these friction pins, because they come out when you press it, which is nice. Sometimes I use the tailor's chalk. I have a box of wax chalk, but I also use dust chalk as well. Sometimes you got to be careful on some fabrics that the wax chalk, leaves the mark. So you got to be careful there. So now for this hem, am I going to do this? I got to do it towards me. I know it's upside down in the camera. For you, I try not to do that, but I'm just going to do this, make a light line all the way around. Now, at the front here, when I fold this up, I'll be starting here and cover stitching all the way around. The cover stitch doesn't back stitch, so I will, after I get done with cover stitching, I'll need to go over to the sewing machine and just tack the front of this at the beginning and the end. So just to tack those. Now on the sleeves, I don't have to, because I'm just going to stitch over about 1 inch on top of where I started the stitch. And that should probably be good enough to hold it in. You could, of course, go back and tack that area if you want as well. I'm not going to do that today. Okay. Let's finish up marking this. Now on the side seam, when I'm in the machine, I will of course fold the seam allowance toward the back. I've been doing that on all of the seams, so I will just make sure that I'm folding that toward the back while I'm at the machine, since I'm not going to pin this. I don't need to pin these up. You could if you want to as you go, but just be sure that you pull those pins out before you stitch over them. You don't want to do that, because if you hit it with the needle, even if you don't break the needle, then you dull the needle, or you get a burr on it, and then it's actually ripping up your fabric. All right, so I'm all done there. So let's do the hard ones first, which are the sleeves, because it's a smaller circle, and I need to turn the sleeves wrong side out, and I'll show you why. Let me find the other sleeve. Okay, so here's the sleeve. So remember, with the cover stitch, we're always stitching on the top or the outside. So I fold it over this way. Go ahead and fold the whole thing. And then I'll grab that line, kind of fold the fabric right on that line. And then I'm going to put the fabric in the machine like this. And so we will be stitching right here and catching the edge of this under that cover stitch area. Now I'm using a narrow cover stitch gauge, so it's about 1/8 of an inch. You could, if you have a cover, you could use a wider stitch, and that gives you a little bit more coverage over here. Now also, I'm just making sure on the sleeve that this seam is pressed toward the back, and it is. So I'm going to fold this over. I'm going to hold that with a clip. I'm going to do that for the other sleeve as well. Where's the back on this? Here's this. Where's the back? That's the front. So this folds this way. Fold down. I just need to hold it because I'll probably readjust everything once I get over to the machine. Clip that. I don't really need to clip the bottom, but which way am I starting? I'm starting this way. So I'll clip this end. Fold that up. And I'll put a clip here just so I know this is the end that I'm starting on. Okay, so I'm gonna get over to that cover stitch machine and get this hemmed up. Okay, so we have all of the hems done. I don't have the bottom up here. So here's the bottom hem. I will press all this later before I do my closing remarks. So the hems are all done. So the last thing we need is the belt, the waist belt for the robe. So I'm just going to fold this up here, cross this way. Okay, put that over there. Here are the two pieces of the belt. Now one side has the notches on it. That's the side we're going to sew together, face sides together. If you find that this belt is too short for your liking, just add some length onto the side that doesn't have the notch. So let's go like this. Place this one right on top of this. I probably don't need a clip, but just to keep everything together. Put one clip there, it's such a short seam. Now, the next thing we're gonna do, after I sew this seam, I'm gonna come back here, I'm gonna fold everything lengthwise in half, and then sew that seam. Okay, so let's do this really quick. Okay, so we've got this seam sewn. So let's do this. We're going to fold this with right sides together. Let me go ahead and press, make sure the seam is going the same way. It doesn't really matter which way you put the seam. I'm just going to do it this way on the face side because it's easier, because we're going to fold this in half. I like to press it flat and then fold it over and kind of press it. This iron didn't get quite hot enough. I set this on the iron station real quick so it warm up a little bit. I'm going to grab a couple of clips. I'll clip this one. Oops. Okay. Make sure everything lays flat. Of course, you can do this while you're in the machine. If I were just making this without doing a video, I probably wouldn't pin or clip, just because I can run through the machine pretty quickly, just getting all these edges together. Okay, let's bring the rest of the clips over. This will be easy. Okay, so I don't think I'm going to grab the iron. I just wanted to press this seam to make sure it laid flat, and then we're going to be turning this right side or face side out. with my loop turner. This is actually a lot of fabric, more fabric than the loop turner is really designed for. If you have one of those tube turners, that would probably come in handy. I don't have any of those. Or you can keep one of the overlocking stitches really long and try to feed it through a large, like one of those big needles for knitting when you're trying to hide your yarn in the stitches. You could probably feed it there and then feed it through and pull it. Okay, so I'm going to start on this side and I'm going to sew up this way because I have the seam going that way, make it a little bit easier. So I'm going to get this all sewn up and I'll be right back here to turn this face side out, and then we'll just have to clean finish these open edges. Okay, so we've got the belt all sewn together. So now I've got my loop turner, as I showed you previously. This is a lot of fabric, so we just have to be careful and make sure that it doesn't go off the end of the loop turner. Feed this all the way through. There are longer loop turners that you can buy. Of course, this is actually pretty wide belt. So there are a lot of different ways to be able to turn this face side out. Get some fuzzies there. Okay, I'm going to grab onto this end. I'm going to poke that. Nope. Sorry, you probably can't see this. I'm going to poke the the closure part through. Hopefully it will stay on. Once it starts turning, usually grab the fabric from the opposite side of where the hook is and try to turn it around. Try to keep a little bit of tension, not a lot, while you're turning, while you're pulling this fabric, because if you don't, sometimes you lose the hook. Okay, and have to walk your hands up. Once you get all the fabric, once you get the other side out, then you don't have to worry about the hook. See, I've got it here. I don't have to worry about that hook anymore. I can take that out and then just gently kind of pull. Okay, so that worked out pretty good. Okay, so now the thing is getting this seam nice and pressed. Okay, here you'll have to pick this out and then press it nice and flat. I will probably do that later because I can do that after I close these holes up. Now, to finish these ends off, you can do it a couple of different ways if you want. You can overlock the edge, turn it over and stitch it down, or if you don't want to overlock it, you can just turn it and roll it over and do like a rolled hem. That's fine as well. Most will probably want to fold the ends to the inside. If I can get the separation here. Fold, try to get it an even amount folded in there. Of course, you can press it once you get it folded if you want to. I'm not going to do that. Fold it so it's nice and flat. I'm going to put a clip there, and you can either hand stitch this closed across on the inside, or you can just do a top stitch, and that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to run over to, once I get this folded in, run over to the sewing machine and just top stitch it. Not too really worried about the look. If I was giving this to someone for a present, I might probably do the hand stitching to just keep it closed and hide all those stitches. Okay, so there's my other clip. Okay, so I'm going to run over and I'm going to stitch those closed, and then we'll be just about finished. Okay, so we have the belt openings closed up, and let's go ahead and bring the robe back in here. Let's pull this up here a little bit. And let's insert this into the belt loop here. Okay, this is going to be the front. Bring this around underneath the back. It's about the center. Put this through that belt loop. All right. And then we can just tie it. And there we have our completed robe, very basic robe. I'm going to give this one final press, and then I will be back with my final remarks. And here it is, the finished robe. And here it is, the finished robe. I really think this is a terrific beginner pattern. If you're interested in learning how all the parts of a garment go together, everything goes together pretty easy. Like I said in the intro video, there's not a lot of easing in the sleeve. It goes right into the armhole area. If you're interested in learning to sew with knits, this is also a great exercise. And also if you're learning to use your serger or overlock. I do want to mention that even though I use a cover stitch for all the top stitching on this, except for the pockets, anywhere I use the cover stitch, you can use a zigzag stitch or a double needle in your regular home sewing machine. I hope you learned something from this video. I wanted to thank you for watching, and as always, be well.